My brother stood in the middle of my engagement party and raised his glass. "Let's be honest," he said, smiling at everyone but me. "Some people just get lucky. Some people work for what they have." My father laughed. My mother nodded like it was scripture. Nobody in that room knew that 3 weeks earlier, a woman named Priya Nasser had called me out of nowhere and said 11 words that changed everything. "I think I finally know what happened to your scholarship. My name is Meredith Coulson. I'm 33. If you've ever smiled through a room full of people who underestimated you on purpose, hit like, subscribe, and comment your city right now, because what happened next, I promise you, is worth staying for." Let me take you back to where this actually started, not the party. The party was just the night the truth finally walked through the front door. 12 years ago, I was 21, finishing my degree in structural engineering at a state university in Ohio, and drowning in tuition debt my parents refused to help with, not because they couldn't, but because, in my mother's words, your brother's education comes first. That spring, I applied for something called the Halverson Merit Fellowship, a full-ride graduate placement at a research institute in Chicago, funded by a private foundation, given to exactly one engineering student a year in the entire Midwest region. I got the interview, I got the second interview, and on a Thursday afternoon in April, I got a phone call from a woman named Dr. Ilse Renfrew, the fellowship's program director, telling me I had been selected. I cried in my dorm room. I called my mother. She asked, very calmly, for the foundation's name, the program director's direct line, and the exact dollar amount of the award. I told her everything. I thought she was proud. 9 days later, an email arrived in my inbox. It said the foundation had identified a documentation discrepancy in my academic transcript and, with regret, was rescinding my fellowship offer pending further review. It was signed by Dr. Renfrew. I never heard from the foundation again. I assumed I'd been quietly blacklisted. I assumed my transcript really did have some error I never found. I buried the humiliation so deep I stopped mentioning engineering school at family dinners altogether. My brother, Dawson, started his master's program in finance that same fall. My parents paid for all of it. Nobody ever explained why. Fast forward 12 years. I run my own structural consulting firm now, out of a converted warehouse office in Columbus. Small team, steady contracts, nothing anyone in my family has ever asked a single question about. Then, out of nowhere, a LinkedIn message from a woman named Priya Nasser, who identifies herself as the current archivist for the Halverson Foundation, now a much larger nonprofit that occasionally digitizes old award records for a historical registry. Her message? I was cataloging our 2013 fellowship files and found something that didn't sit right. Do you have 15 minutes to talk? I almost didn't reply. 12 years is a long time to let a wound scar over. But something about the specificity of her message, 2013, the exact year, made my hands shake. I called her the next morning. She told me that while digitizing old files, she'd found my original interview scorecard, signed by Dr. Renfrew, marking me as the top candidate that year, and a second document, filed 9 days later, purporting to be a formal rescission letter. The problem, Priya said, is that Dr. Renfrew retired in 2011. She was not employed by this foundation in 2013. She could not have signed anything that year. Someone forged her signature using an old letterhead template we hadn't updated in our archive system. I sat down on my kitchen floor. There's something else, Priya said. The fellowship that year wasn't left unfilled. Someone else was placed in the Chicago program under your file number. I have her intake paperwork here. Would you like the name? I already knew. The name on the intake form was Dawson Coulson. My brother had entered the Halverson Fellowship's placement program that fall, not under the finance scholarship my parents always claimed had paid for his master's degree, but under my engineering fellowship, quietly transferred into a joint program track the foundation ran with the Chicago Business School. Priya emailed me scanned copies that afternoon, the real acceptance letter with Dr. Renfrew's authentic 2011-era signature template, side by side with the forged 2013 rescission letter. The forged one used a foundation logo that hadn't existed until a 2015 rebrand, a full 2 years after the letter's supposed date. Someone had built that forgery using a newer template on an older date. Whoever created it hadn't thought anyone would ever compare the paper trail side by side. I knew exactly who had access to printers, letterhead samples, and my mail before I ever saw it. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Dawson. Instead, I did something I'd never done in 12 years. I hired a document examiner, a woman named Fatima Osei, to formally authenticate both letters. Her written report took 6 weeks. It confirmed everything: 2 different printers, 2 different production dates, and a signature on the rescission letter that was, in her professional opinion, inconsistent with genuine handwriting and consistent with manual replication from a scanned signature source. I now had, in writing, from an independent expert, proof that someone had stolen my fellowship and forged a federal-adjacent nonprofit document to cover it up. Here's the part where my family thinks the story ends the way it always has, with me quietly absorbing another disappointment. I got engaged that spring to a man named Nathaniel Farrow, a contracts attorney who, when I finally told him the whole story over dinner one night, went completely still, put down his fork, and said, "Send me everything you have." He didn't do it out of anger. He did it the way a good lawyer does anything: methodically, quietly, and without telling me every step until he had something solid. 2 weeks before our engagement party, my mother called to help plan the seating chart for an event that had been fully planned for a month. I understood exactly what that visit really was: a scouting trip, a chance to see how happy I'd become and decide how to shrink it back down to size. She had no idea that Nathaniel had spent 4 months building a formal file, the forged letter, Fatima's authentication report, and a notarized statement from Priya Nasser confirming Dawson's real intake record. She had no idea that the brother she raised on borrowed credit was about to run out of room to smile. So there we were, my engagement party, my brother, mid-toast, telling 40 guests that some people just get lucky while others work for it. My mother, nodding along, the same practice nod she'd given me 12 years ago while copying down a program director's direct line she had no business asking for. I didn't raise my voice. I set my glass down. "Dawson," I said, "do you want to tell everyone which foundation actually paid for your master's degree? Or should I?" The room went quiet in that specific way. Rooms go quiet when everyone senses a story is about to change shape in real time. Nathaniel walked over and set a folder on the head table. Inside, my authentic acceptance letter beside the forged rescission letter, the logo mismatch circled in red by Fatima's own hand. Dawson's real 2013 intake form under the Halverson program. A signed, notarized letter from Priya Nasser explaining exactly how the archive had uncovered it. My mother did not nod again that night. Dawson's employer, a regional investment firm that had specifically hired him, citing his prestigious Halverson-affiliated education, opened an internal review within the month once the foundation formally confirmed the fraud in writing. My mother, for the first time in 12 years, had no story left to reach for. No calm phone call could undo a document examiner's signed report. No practiced smile could argue with a forged letterhead that used a logo that didn't exist yet. I didn't scream at that party, and I haven't screamed since. 12 years of silence taught me something better than anger: patience, documentation, and a partner willing to spend months building a case instead of a single dramatic sentence. My wedding happened on schedule, 6 months later, in a small garden venue outside Columbus. Everyone I actually wanted there was there. Some names that used to fill every family event were quietly, permanently absent from that guest list. They weren't missed. 12 years of my life were reshaped by a forged letter and a family that decided my future was a resource to be redistributed. But silence isn't the same as forgetting. I remembered every detail, down to the exact date, the exact dollar figure, the exact sound of my mother's voice asking for a stranger's direct line. And when the truth finally spoke, it didn't need to raise its voice either. It just needed paper, patience, and one honest woman digitizing old files who happened to notice something that didn't sit right. If you made it this far, tell me in the comments. Would you have confronted them the moment you found out? Or would you have built the case quietly, the way I did, until the truth couldn't be argued with? Like this video, if you believe the truth always finds a way out. Subscribe if you want to hear what happened when my father finally found out how long my mother had known. That story is next. I'm Meredith Coulson, and this was the night my silence finally got the last word.